I suggest we get started here now. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're very excited to be hosting the Restore4Life project, which is part of the Danube and Black Sea Lighthouse within the Mission Ocean and Mission Ocean waters. It's a project that showcases the remarkable socio-economic benefits derived from a comprehensive and interdisciplinary approach to restoring freshwater and coastal wetlands in the Danube basin. So we're very excited because we have quite a few speakers today, and I'm going to start presenting our 5 speakers today, and then I'll pass on to them. This session will most likely overrun the 1-hour mark, so I hope many of you can stay on for questions. And if not, please do use the Q&A box and record those questions for us, and then we will hopefully get those answered and sent back to you. So starting with our first speaker, we have team coordinator Mihai Adamescu. Has a Bachelor in Science and PhD in Biology, Ecology, Sustainable Development. He is head of the Research Center in Systems Ecology and Sustainability at the University of Bucharest. The main areas of research approach include ecology of large rivers, employing systems ecology principles to foster sustainability, sensor networks, and high-frequency monitoring for complex systems, management plans, and exploring biodiversity conservation strategies. Our second speaker is Oriane Georges, and she is a project manager, marine scientist, and bioindustries engineer dedicated to environmental preservation. She has been working for the past few years on research and development and innovation EU projects related to marine, environmental, and ecosystems restoration as a project manager, communication manager, and work package leader. Speaker 3, Associate Professor Dr. Martin Pusch, I hope I pronounced that right, Pusch, is an aquatic ecologist who focuses on the ecology and management of rivers and lake shores. He has applied a broad range of approaches in structural and functional ecology related to benthic invertebrates, measuring the effects of hydraulics on benthic invertebrates in rivers and at lake shores, and to the metabolism of organic matter related with the management of surface waters. Our speaker number 4 is Paul Goriel. He holds a joint honors degree in Bachelor of Science in Botany and Zoology and a Master's in Science in Conservation Science. He is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management and a member of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas. Paul founded and remains director of Nature Bureau Limited, a company that provides technical support for ecological management projects in the UK and abroad. In 1993, Paul started to work for international donors on environmental issues in the Black Sea Basin, which in 1996 led him to establish Fieldfare International Ecological Development Limited, one of Britain's first pro-nature companies. This company has raised private sector capital for small-scale investments in Ukraine, such as biomass energy production and ecotourism. And our last speaker is Tim Grandjean, is an environmental scientist focused on protecting and restoring wetland and coastal ecosystems to target efficient protection and meaningful environmental change. His focus is on community-driven initiatives and to integrate citizen science into conservation, enhancing both public involvement and data collection efficiency. So over to you, Mihai, to start us off. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a very nice introduction, I have to say. I hope you can see my screen, the right one, hopefully.
Yes, all good.
Okay, wonderful. So yeah, indeed, we have one of the nicest projects dealing with restoration in the Danube Basin. Of course, there are others as well, but just to say that ours has the best name ever because it's Restore4Life. The aim of the project actually is to restore wetland complexes as life supporting systems in the Danube Basin. And of course, one of the idea is to understand the need for wetland restoration. And if we have a look, especially what has happened in Europe, we could see that actually we as a society were very good at destroying wetlands with an accelerated rate over the centuries. And in this moment, wetlands are covering, let's say, close to 4.5% of the EU terrestrial areas. And of course, in the latest assessment of the state of the nature, you could see that actually in Europe, you could see that actually a high proportion of the wetlands are not in good conditions, and actually they are in unfavorable status, and 51% are still deteriorating. And this is actually very important for us, and it's important because wetlands have a lot of are providing a lot of ecosystem services to people, and this is very important in long term, but also in short term. And you can see here, for example, several of the ecosystem services that wetlands are providing for humans and for nature in itself, starting from supporting ecosystem services to provisioning to regulating services and final to cultural ecosystem services. All of them are very important for humans, and this is one of the reasons to actually conserve in first instance, and then to restore wetlands as much as possible. The aim of the project is actually we want not only to restore wetlands just for conservation purposes, but we want to enhance the ecosystem services that are provided by wetlands to the human society. So we want to increase the water and pollutant retention of the wetlands, to stress the need for carbon sequestration in wetlands, and to show that the wetlands are good for that. To show also the tourism opportunities that the wetlands are bringing to humans, and also to enhance the resilience of water-dependent habitats. And these are let's say, the aims, further aims of restoring wetlands. Of course, we have several project goals. And in our case, we have the development of the Restore4Life wetland restoration decision support system, which we want to have as a service that will be provided for long term. And so for that, we aim to have a platform that we will run several services, including satellite images, including in situ data, including other type of tools that we will develop together as a project. And that will be part of the decision support system to help the restoration process. We want also to empower different communities because we think that this is one of the biggest challenges, to engage with the communities and to bring communities in front of wetland restoration. So they will act and they have to be, let's say, the main focus of the project in this sense. Then we want also to share with local communities the fact that they can earn money and they can have successful business activities in restored ecosystems. So we want to show also that as a way to enhance the restoration activities all over the Danube Basin, but also across Europe and perhaps in other countries, in other parts of the world. And also, we want to support the implementation of holistic wetland restoration solutions. And that is actually, if you look at everything put together, this is actually what we want to achieve. Of course, one of the reasons and one of the things that we want to convey is the fact that we need to let people understand the huge role of the stakeholders, the huge role of local communities as a central aspect of restoration. And many conflicting aspects are due to poor understanding of the complexity of the interaction between stakeholders, because mainly wetlands have many uses. For example, in the happy case in which we are not transforming the land itself, in which we are not transforming the wetlands, for example. Oh, sorry. Okay. Now you cannot see my screen anymore.
I can see your presentation, yes.
You can see my presentation. Then it's good. Okay. Yeah, when this is the happy case in which the wetlands is not transformed into agriculture, for example. And we have to keep in mind that Europe will not achieve its 2030 goals without taking urgent actions during the next 10 years, let's say, maybe less, to address this alarming rate of biodiversity loss, including wetlands. And for that, we need transformative change. And I think this is one of the important things to keep in mind, the need for this transformative change. Transformative change, that means that actually we are not talking about optimization or incremental change or improving efficiency of what we are doing, or doing the current practice or business as usual, or building silos around what we are developing and different communities. But actually, it's about engaging in radical change, in understanding that wetlands are part of the systems and are systems themselves. We need to understand the fundamental transformation that we need to convene in and to understand the root causes and indirect drivers of the wetland loss and the need for restoration. And of course, we need to change the paradigms. We need to have new narratives and new ways to approach wetland restoration and the way we feel and we understand wetlands. And of course, one reason is to understand that we cannot go as we did before, because you can see here that we have only incremental in population, incremental in real GDP, incremental in fertilizers, water use, everything is incremental. The problem is that we need to change this kind of approach and make this paradigm shift towards a transformative change, and also to understand the wetlands in a complex environment. So the Restore4Life aim is actually to develop this wetland restoration decision support systems that will allow large-scale holistic wetland restoration activities in the Danube Basin and in Europe through extensive dialogue and co-creation with multiple actors. And this is actually what we intend to do. And you will see in the presentation of Paul, Martin, Tim, and Oriane, the approaches that we are taking for this. We have several phases in the project. You will see different linkages between different type of work packages. The first one is about the development of the project itself, where we are discussing about co-design, co-participation, stakeholder engagement, understanding the socio-ecological gradients along the Danube Basin, and also the climatic gradients, the need for platform for evidence-based knowledge, the wetland accelerator, and of course the stakeholder engagement. And all of these is allowing us to move to the second phase, which is going to be the testing and validation of the things that we are developing in the first phase. And in this phase, we are actually developing wetland restoration frameworks, and we will demonstrate the holistic restoration approach. Then in the third step, we have the implementation and upscaling phase, in which we want to show that actually we will support local revenues and business activities in restored ecosystems. And of course, we want to show that we can upscale inside and outside of the Danube region. This is the general scheme of the project with the specific objectives. And of course, this is the last, let's say, the aim of the project, innovative wetland restoration, long-lasting science service that we want to implement at the end of the project. Of course, we have a lot of expecting outcomes. I will not read them because you can find them also on our webpage. But I think they are important because we want in the end to reverse the deterioration of further wetlands in the Danube River basin, and we want to be able to let people understand why we need wetlands in the Danube River basin. Of course, these are the different work packages. We have different wetland restoration demonstration cases. So we want to not only to show theoretically, but we want to implement this. And for that, we have 4 implementation sites and 6 monitoring sites in which we are doing. In these 6 monitoring sites, we are looking at long-term trends after restoration. So we want to understand what is the success of these monitoring sites, and to see what we can improve in time. And of course, these are the 4 implementation sites. We have implementation sites in Slovakia and Austria, in Slovakia again, in Serbia, and in Romania, of course. And we have also other 6 monitoring sites that I talked about, also distributed in the Danube basin. I invite you to see, and because we have a newsletter, and you can scan this and you can have a look at the periodical newsletter that we, Oriane will talk more about. And for that, I will pass to Oriane, and thank you for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihai. I guess you can see my screen already, right? Yes, okay, perfect.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Oriane. I work for F6S, and I'm the communication and dissemination leader of Restore4Life project that Mihai just introduced. I want to take this opportunity of this webinar to discuss a little bit with you the open call that is currently open for application until the 29th of May. So we are approaching very fast the deadline now. And we are looking at 5 associated regions to prepare roadmap, plans, and projects to restore wetland ecosystem in the region. So we are going to fund up to €100,000 per region. So the aim of the open call, as I mentioned, is to share the results and the knowledge of the project on an ongoing basis with the selected associated region. And we will provide you with scientific and technical support for the implementation of wetland restoration solution in your territory. So the open call has been open since the 1st of February 2024. And as I mentioned, we are really fast approaching the deadline on the 29th of May. And in June, we will start evaluating and select the project. So the open call is targeting local and regional authority. So I really invite you to spread the news, and if you are interested to contact us as well. These are the eligible countries that you that can apply. So the one around the Danube area are not eligible because they are part of our consortium. So all our consortium partner countries are not eligible, but you can find all the information of our website with this great map to understand who can apply. How can you apply for our open call? So you will find on our website all our documentation. So we have developed proper guidelines for applicant, an example of the sub-grant agreement and the declaration of owner. And you can submit the application directly on the website. I will just show you quickly when you come on our website. You have this pop-up window. Actually, if you click on more info, you go directly on all the information regarding the open call, the deadline, the eligible country. We have already had a webinar to give information on how to apply and what are the rules. that you can rewatch directly on the website. And here you can find all the documentation and the submit application button. We also have the frequently asked questions to support you. And if you still have questions, we have the contact info at restore4life.eu to know more. And you can also, so Mihai has presented all our implementation sites because the open call is, you need to develop your restoration plan, but also be related on what we have been doing in our own project. So here you will find a website page with all our implementation site and exactly what we are doing there. And the same for the monitoring side. So each side has its own page. You can find exactly what we are doing there. Coming back to the presentation, how to apply, and that's it. So thank you. And yeah, as I said, we are the communication web package. So feel free to reach out also if you have other projects that you want to build synergy together. And now I can pass on the floor to Martin to go more on the technical, and that will provide you with some restoration solution for our wetland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariane. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, but not in presenter mode yet.
Yeah, no.
Yes.
So
perfect.
I'm Martin Pusch from the Leibniz Institute of Freshwater Ecology and Inland Fisheries in Berlin, and I'm giving a short introduction to restoration approaches based on nature-based solutions. I want to focus on the importance of nature-based solutions in that concept in order to support restoration approaches. Why do we have too few restoration projects? Still, the biodiversity is dwindling. What are the reasons for this? Of course, the main reason is that water is a scarce resource in most areas. Many interests are approaching it, and many regulations are regulating the use of water, but often these regulations are not harmonized. So any water manager who has to deal with surface waters is actually overwhelmed by the many stakeholders, the many interests, also the often huge economic interests that are linked with surface waters. So in case you want to change anything, either to the better or to the worse, you are facing many obstacles. So many institutions and stakeholders are involved. The regulations are sectorally split up. There are vertical hierarchies, complex problems to be solved, multiple target conflicts, which results in significant implementation deficits. So even in Europe, where since 24 years we have the EU Water Framework Directive that urges member states to improve the status of surface waters, we don't have significant improvements. Yeah, what is a possible solution to that situation? We have to establish an integrative and intersectoral decision-making, which, from my experience, already represents a breakthrough in such projects. If all stakeholders from all sectors just talk to each other and exchange about their interests, then it might be easy to find synergies, to find compromises, good compromises, and win-win situations. So what we need is an intersectoral integration of spatial planning. For that, the ecosystem services concept provides a good platform. I will talk more on that in the next slides. In order to prioritize the actions, and also the legal restoration and climate adaptation objectives can be fed into that communication process. Also, financial support and market demand approaches can be structured according to those ecosystem services. Yeah, the ecosystem services concept enables overviews on the whole range of humans' benefits and uses. It enables an assessment of the trade-offs by dominant uses, because often we have one or a few dominant uses of the waters that are affecting the other uses. We can assess the sustainability of the current state or of several development scenarios. And it also enables the building of management scenarios with multiple and sustainable human benefits. So that's what we are heading for. Yeah, nature-based solutions, how are those linked to ecosystem services? Actually, the definition of nature-based solutions, which is given here, is that these are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems. So this is about the structure of the ecosystems, but also it adds aspects to address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, which means that the goals of management of the surface waters should be jointly managed with all involving all parts of society, and the result should then be the provision of human well-being and biodiversity benefits. So humans and nature both should benefit from the implementation of nature-based solutions. So what you see on the right, this is a very nice IUCN sketch that shows that the challenges that are given on the top of the graphics is then approached by this nature-based or ecosystem-based approach. And the goals are given on the bottom, the human well-being and biodiversity. And I added here these red arrows representing the ecosystem services, as these represent the flux of ecosystem services going from the ecosystem through society to human well-being and biodiversity. Yeah, and of course, if we restore ecosystems, the availability and flux of ecosystem services will increase. This is a result from a literature review on the effects of restoration activities on ecosystem service provisioning. So these three graphics show on the left several provisioning ecosystem services, in the center several regulating ecosystem services, and on the right side several cultural ecosystem services. And the dark columns show the increases of those ecosystem services due to restoration activities. Yeah, now it gets a bit complicated. I will not go into details of the next slides. This is just presenting an approach how to assess the ecosystem services based on available GIS data, on land use, on vegetation, on water availability. So we developed a so-called River Ecosystem Service Index that uses this GIS data to assess the availability of about 20 ecosystem services, which then can be used to develop a success balance for several restoration scenarios, also to prioritize several restoration activities. We have applied this on several rivers in Germany, especially also on the Danube. The results are some colored maps that show in colored codes the availability of ecosystem services. The similar effort was done in the Interact project EDIS along the whole of the Danube, where, for instance, the availability of habitat provision of habitats, but also of nitrogen retention and of flood retention was mapped, not only for the status quo, but also for several scenarios, which then also can be balanced and compared so that the most effective scenario then can be chosen. So these were just some examples. I'm scrolling through those slides as we are a little bit late already, and come to the my conclusions. So the challenge that we have, as said, are the multiple uses and management goals. We have dwindling biodiversity, reduced resilience to climate change. Technical solutions often have the risk of failure due to the dynamics of climate change, as technical solutions, of course, can hardly be adapted to changing conditions. And we have limited acceptance of management actions by stakeholders. The solutions would be to focus on the benefits from functional ecosystems, using the ecosystem services as a communication platform, which frames environmental issues in a positive background. Then to focus on scalable, multifunctional, nature-based solutions instead of inflexible and hard engineering measures, which then can increase the resilience of the environment by supporting functional ecosystems. And of course, as already mentioned before, also by Mihai, participatory planning processes are needed to increase the probability of implementation of prioritized measures. And to end with a positive outlook, of course, we are not starting at scratch. Already many restoration approaches based on nature-based solutions have been implemented at large scale, even in Europe. So there are good examples, and we just have to build on those and bring them and support the implementation at large scale. Here are some references on the sources that and on the results that I've presented from the RESI project, the Interact project EDIS, and also again here's the internet site of the Restore4Life project, where we will build up on those results and implement them to the Danube catchment. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to questions in the Q&A session later, and I'm handing over to Paul now.
Thank you, Martin. So Martin has given a great description, what you might call the macro scale of our projects in relation to nature-based solutions for wetland restoration. I lead work package 4 in the project, which is looking more at the micro scale, at the individual stakeholder and entrepreneurs, and how local communities can increase their revenues from these restorations. So what is a nature-based business? Basically, it's one that delivers net ecological benefit at the end of the day. So they work with nature, and both human well-being and natural resources, biodiversity and so on, ecosystem services also benefit, and that's a mutually reinforcing feedback loop. That's what we want to have. What is net ecological benefit, which is sometimes or is increasingly now known as biodiversity net gain? It's the difference in the ecological state of a geographically determined area from the present time projected forward to a specified future date, which can be considered as an improvement in ecological conditions and functions for habitats and or species. In the UK, for example, where biodiversity net gain is now part of a recent Environment Act, the specified future date is 30 years from the point at which a ecological benefit has to be delivered and monitored. And there's extensive guidelines now on how these measurements should be made and monitored. The important thing is that net ecological benefit as a concept infers the sustainable use of natural resources as an inherent feature of an investment, in the same way as net profit indicates financial soundness of the business. The main nature-based business sectors, most of them are in the primary sector, or there are a few upstream examples. So not surprisingly, forestry, environmentally friendly agriculture that encompasses organic farming or now regenerative farming, carbon farming. There are all these new sectors of agriculture coming in, which are environmentally friendly. Fisheries, pharmaceuticals and cosmetics, there's the derivatives, obviously, from plant and animal products. Green tourism in the broad sense. Biomass for renewable energies, a kind of green carbon, and ecosystem services, so that you can, for example, if you're accumulating carbon, you can get payments for that. An example of how a nature-based business might work is one that I've been personally involved with in the Danube Delta region of Ukraine. It was a biomass energy and biodiversity improvement investment that we made. The situation in the Danube Delta part of Ukraine, southwest Ukraine, is that thanks to decades of hard engineered water channels, sluices, dams, and so on, as Martin was referring to, has resulted in a stabilized floodplain. So the dynamics have been severely reduced. This has allowed vast invasion of floodplains by reeds, which have formed this kind of continuous monoculture that you see over here. And they push out a lot of biodiversity, because all the open water that used to exist, the channels, the little lakes and so on, get grown over. And we lose important colonies of species like spoonbills and glossy ibis. At the same time, these reed beds are easy to ignite, either by lightning strikes or deliberately by arsonists who like to see the flames. You get enormous quantities of ash and carbon dioxide being emitted by these wildfires. And at the same time, they can even threaten local settlements, encroaching, because they just go completely out of control. So from the point of view of community safety and also of biodiversity, somehow we should try and restore the ecological dynamics in these floodplain areas. There are several ways you could do it. You can burn the reed, which is what some people do, but these reed beds are far too large for that. You could apply weed killing chemicals, but that obviously is not very ecological. So really the only thing that's left is cutting it. But cutting, which you can do with harvesters like this, which are used for cutting reed for thatch, for example. To do it on a large scale across whole reed beds is extremely expensive. But it does actually lead to a more dynamic system with open water areas, which attract not only our spoonbills and glossy ibis, but also other species like ferruginous duck, red list species. And this increase in wildfowl also then increases predators, rare predators like the white-tailed sea eagle. But cutting the reed bed generates a huge amount of biomass, up to 12 tons per hectare. So what to do with that? And that was a problem that was holding everything back until we started to become interested in renewable energy as a way to reduce carbon emissions and the benefits from that. And there were subsidy programs to help people convert to renewable energies. So now in our project, we took all this biomass, we milled it, made pellets from it, and started to sell that as a fuel for biomass boilers, to the extent that in the local community, the guy who was selling gas boilers also started to sell biomass boilers, and local companies were buying those and using our pellets to heat their premises. So that overall becomes an interesting model of a, how do I get rid of this? A short carbon cycle with biodiversity and community benefits. So we have the ecological benefits here in cutting the reed beds for open water, higher biodiversity, less fires, less threats to the local community. But also now you can have new revenue streams from tourism, bird watching in particular. We also get, by extending the project, especially over arable areas, by re-wetting those and creating new reed beds, we can get a carbon benefit. And in any case, already at present, just the cutting and selling the pellets generates a revenue which pays all the costs of the harvesting, the investment in the machinery and the labor, and still a profit left over for the investors. So that's a very good model and an example of how a biodiversity-based business might operate. In our project, we have 4 implementation sites, as Mihai has mentioned. We have this riverine forest in Austria-Slovakia border along the Danube. We have a dried up natural river channel in Slovakia because the river was diverted, and the idea there is to divert the river back into that channel and restore it. We have this channel in Romania and its reed beds, which is an important fish breeding area, but with sedimentation and other impacts, that's becoming less useful as a fish breeding area and can be restored. And finally, in Serbia, we have this area of it's a raised bog, one of the very few examples actually this far south in Europe. Most of it was destroyed by the construction of a hydropower dam to generate electricity, but there are some areas left, and by re-wetting actually some of these lower slopes, we hope to restore the peatlands there. So those are the sites that are going to be restored during this project, and we are trying to look at what are the opportunities for setting up local businesses based on the services that these newly restored areas will provide. So our team visited all of the sites and we held information workshops. We worked with the local stakeholders, and we also had, in the course of those workshops, carried out PESEL analyses. Now, PESEL analyses involve local stakeholders working together to go through a series of exercises. I thought I had a slide somewhere else, but it seems to have disappeared. And we had the people, we went through this exercise. The participants in it were mainly researchers, civil servants, and from NGOs, with only a few business people present. None of the sites actually had people living within them, however. So what we had actually were communities that were interested in the sites, but not actually making their living from the sites themselves. Sorry, got confused. Right, well, so a PESEL analysis is used widely in business for evaluating your threats in general to any new initiative you might want to take. And you can also use it, in our case, for looking at the problems that might surround a proposal, for example, to restore a wetland site. So PESEL just is the acronym for politics, economics, social issues, technological development, legal frameworks, and environmental impacts. And you construct it by looking at what might be the main influences under each of these factors, for example, government reform, and then what the implications might be for your business proposal. So, for example, government reform might result in having new ministers in office who are not so interested, or maybe more interested in doing pro-biodiversity business support. You might have changes in funding schemes from the government, which would affect your project eligibility and profitability and feasibility, and so on. And then coming down the list in the environment, for example, obviously, the physical geography and climate is important. Climate change is changing seasonal conditions. So if you're in something like producing organic products, that's very important. And there's also the question quite often of hazardous materials getting into the system and how you handle and dispose of the materials that you use in the business. This is rather complicated, unfortunately, but I'll try to explain it briefly. So we have here the PESEL features, the issues that we've associated with each of those features, the main ones. And we asked our stakeholders to score each of these issues on a scale of 1 to 5. And the way they did that was simply, I would describe what the issue would be, and then they held up their hands at the end to show me how many votes we had for each of these scores for each of these issues. So, for example, just to take the first one, government reform might lead to new laws and regulations. And then this is a reverse score. So 1 means things are in a good condition or they have a low impact. And 5 means they're quite important in terms of impact, or they're currently not in a very good or even bad condition. And then finally 0 for the undecided abstaining votes. So we had 16 participants. In the first line, 12 of them voted. So the maximum score we could get from that question is 12 by 5 is 60. The actual score was 45, which is 3 times 3 plus 9 times 4. And that gives you a score of 75% of the maximum score. And you do that for all of this. The process took about 2 hours, but it turned out that the interactiveness of it and the discussion of it was quite interesting for the participants, and in some cases became a little bit of fun. We also added in this, it's important to note, some specific nature-based solution questions about the level of policy endorsement for nature-based solutions. In the economic section, we asked questions about competing land use priorities. How do you think nature-based solutions could be give you benefits that you can make revenue from? Are there demands for green finance from entrepreneurs, and so on? And it continues for the other features. We then plotted the results from that exercise. So this is an example from one site just on the politics sector. Anything, you sort of look at these figures, there's nothing standard of thresholds, but we arbitrarily decided that 40%, anything below 40% was in a reasonably good condition or not a serious threat. So for example, here, the risk of theft and damage to your property, to your business, is low, and therefore it's good. Anything in this area between 40 and 60% was moderate, so-so level of condition or impact, and anything above a 60% score, excuse me, considered to be high impact or highly threatening, or currently in a very bad condition. So in this site, people felt that the threat from new laws and regulations would undermine a business opportunity. These funding schemes and permitting just on the threshold there. The highest score was from bureaucratic burden, just from complying with the existing rules and regulations, product licensing, health protection, food security, and so on, scored the highest. So that's the main challenge there in politics. They also felt that the political will to invest in nature-based solutions was not very high. It's in a poor condition. So we take all of those results, and first of all, we wanted to see what was the spread. And this graph, if you add up from each site, all the times a very good condition was scored, that's at number 1, and all the times a bad condition was scored, that's number 5, and obviously 2, 3, and 4 come in between, so that's reasonably good, that's average, this is rather bad, and this is very bad. It follows a kind of normal distribution. that's not particularly surprising because this is a transparent process. People had never participated in a PESEL analysis before, so they tended to group towards the middle and not be too committed on their comments. But nevertheless, you can see that the responses for rather bad are rather more than for rather good. And that would be as we would expect. It was interesting also that for one site, Vlasina in Serbia, we had a very high level of abstentions, and that was nearly that was mainly because the government officials we have there didn't want to commit themselves a lot of the time to anything that might look political. So tabulating those results, you can just see from the colours that most of the scores were not very good. I mean, they were bad or very bad on the whole, a certain amount of moderate, and only one good score, interestingly enough, from Vlasina in Serbia, where people felt that there was a political will to invest in nature-based solutions. And that would be something to look at harder in future. In Slovakia, they had the only two very bad scores, and particularly for both of those for the idea of having nature-based solutions. So as Martin was mentioning, stakeholders at the local level are very conservative and resistant to change and very skeptical about the whole idea of restoration and using nature-based solutions to build business on. And that's a really big challenge for us in the project. So in conclusion on the PESEL analysis, the results were broadly in line actually with the Eurobarometer survey of EU citizens carried out at about the same time. We did our work in November 2023, in September, October 2023, and at the same time Eurobarometer were doing an EU-wide. I think not surprisingly, peace and security came at the top of the list given what's going on in Ukraine at the moment with Russia's invasion. Which also meant that we had to close our operation for the time being. And then health. But economic growth and employment also scored very high, and that's also a usual result in these kind of socio-economic conditions. And in terms of nature-based solutions, this is an opportunity where we can try and demonstrate that economic growth is possible using nature-based solutions. It also helps to solve employment. 1/4 of the respondents actually noted climate change as an issue. So there's an awareness about climate change and how we might address it. And 21% talked about education. And one of the things that scored quite high in our PESEL analysis was the need for better education, particularly upskilling people to understand more about ecological processes and ecosystem services. As I mentioned, only one site at Vlasina in Serbia thought that there was a good situation in terms of political will to invest in nature-based solutions. But in general, the attractiveness of the 4 sites would be ranked as best in Vlasina and worst in Mark, but actually none of them were particularly outstanding. And any initiative would pose many challenges for any entrepreneur wishing to carry out nature-based solution business in those sites. And finally, what's next? We go back this year, starting in June. And now we'll talk specifically to individual businesses, because the PESEL analysis is done in the open. It's transparent with a group of stakeholders. And so you get a generalized response with a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You talk to an individual enterprise and you do it confidentially. And therefore, hopefully, you get more information at the individual enterprise level. So for each enterprise we'll visit, which has something to do with the site, for example, tourism or water-based services. We'll look at the strengths that they feel they have, what weaknesses they experience. And the idea there is to, is to match your weaknesses to your strengths. We also look at opportunities they might have, for example, in changing some of their practices to be more ecologically sustainable, and the threats that they might have, particularly from competitors, new technologies, and so on. And the idea there is to convert threats into opportunities. And we hope that we can show that in both addressing weaknesses and threats, nature-based solutions would be one of the options to look at a restored site. So thank you very much. And I'll now pass the floor to Tim.
Thank you, Paul. I'll share my screen. There we go. So my name is Tim Grandjean. I'm a project manager and researcher at Archipelagos Institute of Marine Conservation. We are a small NGO actually in Greece. And we're already working 25 years or over 25 years with citizen science, because as a very small scale NGO, it's extremely difficult to have expensive tools and be 24/7 everywhere in the Greek seas. So that's why we started working already a long time ago, collaborating with citizens because they could provide us essential information. Well, now this days it's becoming slowly bigger and bigger. And we do as well many things in terrestrial environments, marine environments. So that's a little bit of background to us. In the presentation, it's part of Work Package 2. Work Package 2, we focus on citizen science and environmental education. And as a task leader for the citizen science activities, I'm going to present how we can integrate in an effective way citizen science into conservation. For the ones that are a little bit less familiar with citizen science actually that we start including involving people that are not scientists in our scientific research activities. And citizen science doesn't need to be done by scientists. We are not always the driver, but for example, an NGO or even a governmental organization can do it. And sometimes it's even bottom up. So citizens start creating citizen science activities. But at the end, it's all about doing a kind of scientific research. Interestingly, citizen science is very good to use in areas that are relatively small or remote. As scientists, we would like to be everywhere and to monitor all the environments in our neighborhood, in our country, or even at a global scale. But unfortunately, we cannot be there. The who can be there are actually the people that live there or that work over there. And if we get their attention, they can contribute in a very effective way to science. So as you have seen before, our implementation sites, monitoring sites are at very different locations, very often remote locations. So it is effective to have citizens all year round at those locations, because we're going to do restoration and we want to know how this restoration evolves over time. And one of the important things, what I said before, in Work Package 2, we have citizen science and environmental education both included. And they are highly connected because often it starts with environmental education. It's trying to create a kind of awareness. I'm going to show later on a little bit more about it. And at the end, people become more interested often in the area. They want to contribute. And with citizen science, often they get a kind of feeling of ownership, especially when you see biodiversity is getting better in your area. You really start liking it more and more. And you would like to contribute to it, you feel responsible. So you see, for example, the big cleanups that are happening all around the world. Often it starts as well by the feeling, the sense of ownership. If we talk about citizen science, there are actually often three actors. And in many projects, they always forget one actor, especially policy. But having all the three actors communicating in between each other, interacting between each other, that's really what makes citizen science successful. So often you see there are the drivers, the multipliers that are us scientists, NGOs. We really start setting up nice big projects, but then at a certain time we need a lot of data. So that's where society can come in. So that are really the observers in most cases. Sometimes the society is as well the drive for what I said. Sometimes we really have this bottom-up approach. But together we can have a really big impact because scientists need a lot of data, society is what many people can provide it. But on the other hand, the data quality and the management is often done by the drivers because they can really check if the data is okay, if the data fits the standard. Because sometimes you see that an observer is saying a species that it's absolutely impossible at a location. Well, scientists really need to control it. On the other hand, we have the policy, and policy really need to get information after restoration activities, if the restoration is going okay, or if they want to implement certain activities somewhere from, okay, what is the current status? So what we see, and sometimes even bottom up, so that society is saying, hey, we see that biodiversity is getting very bad in our area, and that leads to a decision. That's what we see. And on the other hand, it's a kind of support as well to policy. And on the other hand, policy and science, they need to communicate. So sometimes policy decides something, science is going to implement it together with, for example, the observer. But on the other hand, as well, the evaluation. If we do a restoration, we need to check if it's going okay. And that's where we need to communicate. But for this, we need many different kind of tools, especially because we can create this decision support systems, but we need tools to actually feed it. And that's what Mihai already told that we can use remote sensing, we can use sensors, we can use scientific data, but of course we can as well use citizen science. And citizen science is somehow very positive to use too, because funding often ends, but citizens can continue often without funding or with very limited funding. So that's why we see more and more places, especially for the very long-term monitoring or the time-consuming activities, that we try to simplify it and start including society. I'm in other projects, for example, working a lot with observers for birds, because bird monitoring is extremely time-consuming, while many people like it. And if we give them the right tools, how to provide data to it, it's extremely efficient. But by having those three nicely linked to each other, we can create impact. But if we only have science and society, we can create impact, but completely in a different way, and most likely less impact than when all the three work together, because that means we can bring changes in place. We can make the policy. So in our project, we work, as said before, with 4 implementation sites and 6 monitoring sites. That's quite a lot. And as you can see, it is in many different countries. So we have challenges. What kind of typical challenges we see in citizen science, or typical challenges we see in citizen science, we see as well in our project. So we have communities, but completely different communities. Sometimes almost no community, a very small community. Sometimes a huge community. And we need to find the right community and get them interested and involved. I'm going to show later on a little bit more how we can do that. On the other hand, challenges you have when you work in many different countries is language. We speak now English, but many people, especially from local remote areas, they don't speak that well English. So if we're going to make in an European project a very nice tool, then if that's only available in English, it will not be that much implemented. So we need to make a tool that is most likely available in their language. And that's a challenge. But that's definitely a challenge we try to overcome. And on the other hand, wetlands are often not that easy to access. And that's what we need to think about. And in some countries, it is more easy to access, but they are not allowed to go everywhere, or for example, private property. How can you manage that? So these are the typical problems we scientists often face when we want to start working with citizens. And for example, to create a community. But creating a community is a completely different topic. We can get there a lecture about for hours. What we often see due to those challenges that many projects, if we try to create a general scope of projects, we see often that projects are really focused on local initiatives, because it's way more easy to target a specific community in a specific language than target at many different places a community. But importantly, that result of that maybe have a local high impact, but not a large scale high impact. There are just a few tools that work in a regional scale, and there are on average quite a lot global tools, but those global tools are often more about quantity than quality of data. Well, if we really want to evaluate decision and influence policy, then we really need to have qualitative data, not only a lot of data. So typical organizations that are the drivers, that are often universities, NGOs. But what is really important is not only that we have the hosting institutes, but that all the institutes actually, 12 government agencies, act together. And that there's maybe not one host of this initiative, that they get multiple ownership. But what really is missing, and that's what we've thought, is there's not a tool or toolbox that brings really nicely together the actors, and for example, that shows citizens what kind of work they do, but actually show as well the end users, the policy from, okay, what does the data citizens collect mean for their area? And that's really a big thing that is missing. If you ask citizens why you would like to contribute, this is in research done a few years ago, then we often see that people want to contribute because they have interest in the environment. They want to support conservation. And it's not that they would like to go outside or meet other people. So what this graph already shows, and that's why Work Package 2 is not only about citizen science, but as well about environmental education. It's about awareness raising. Because if there's no awareness, then most likely people will not be interested to go in the field. So if we have efficient environmental education ongoing, then most likely they become interested and would like to contribute and continue. And on the other hand, it means, well, if we design a tool, then the tool should get some feedback loops to keep them interested. So what you often see is that scientists ask citizens to provide information, but when they're not getting in time feedback, and that's really a challenge, often you need to get feedback sometimes even in a couple of weeks, or seeing what kind of what your contribution means, then they start getting less interested in your activities. And then your community is often getting even smaller and smaller, and the impact is even less. So feedback mechanisms are extremely important. And we check, for example, as well, what are typical themes covered. But often you see that's about biodiversity, awareness, little monitoring. But these are very easy topics to collect in huge amounts. Biodiversity, okay, let's monitor a specific bird or a specific plant. But it's often a little bit more difficult to quantify. And to make it like quality the data. So that's something that's important to include in the toolboxes we develop. And that's well not only in what we are doing, that's in general important in citizen science. Typical problems and then strategies how to work with citizen science. The typical problem with citizen science, if you go, for example, to Google Play or the App Store from Apple, and you type in citizen science, you see popping up many different tools, almost a limited amount of tools. They all focus on either a specific area, a very specific thing, and that's nice. But on the other hand, there's not pure data quality. It's not always data. The data is not always consistent, and there's often not the link to the scientist and the link towards the end user, and that makes it a nice data set that maybe can be used, but what does the data set mean? So what we need and what we try to do within Restore4Life is try to create a toolbox with clear protocols and training. So maybe we're still going to use tools you see in this kind of app store, but at least there's a kind of protocol for a specific location how to use it. So we are sure what the people collect that we can use it. And often it should need to be a kind of collaborative platform so that you see, in my specific area where restoration is happening, this kind of people and activities are ongoing. There's so much data collection that you really see what is happening. So that means, well, a kind of, motivation that you're not alone. And in the toolbox we try to develop, there's this kind of feedback and recognition. So you can see who's doing it, but as well, scientists can get updates most likely. So there is this constant feedback and a kind of loop in the system. And that makes, from our experience and what we see more and more in the communities, it's extremely effective. So citizen science is not only asking people to collect information, but as well having the feedback loops, and really keep them trained and keep them informed. So that's well where you look and what kind of tools are used in citizen science. We often see that it's about smartphones or actually data forms. Sometimes we see that there are activities more with measurement kits or data logging equipment. But on the other hand, we need to realize that it's expensive. Not everyone has it, or they need to get it from somewhere. So often you see that ends up more towards environmental education. Easy citizen science should be easy. People go to the field without that much instruments or needs. They can collect information, and that information should be and can be transformed by scientists to very good data or actually decision, or actually by the end users. So this is actually the graph where we started with, but you really see we need kind of this loop between the different actors. And if we get a loop between the different actors, things are efficient. So how are we aiming to do that by Restore4Life? We're going to develop different kind of apps. For example, we're developing an app, Wetlands4Life, for data collection. So that's really the app that citizens are using, or actually a toolbox, or maybe linking to other apps or initiatives, but at least that for their specific wetland, where they can find all the information they need. And they don't need to go to many different websites for many different things. No, there's everything explained how to do it. On the other hand, there's a kind of gamification. That's the right red box. And this gamification is actually there we try to educate them more about what does wetland restoration mean. And then in the middle, not directly this gamification, but at the end there's a solution for life, and that's more for authorities or NGOs that helps them, for example, to identify the restoration. But we're still in development, and we really need to think about how to act this in a very good, efficient way. But there's a monitoring, there's decision making, and that's all what is happening within this decision support systems and tools behind it. So most important with citizen science, because I've seen people from many different countries in the world, there are many different tools. So there's not always the need to create your tool, but at least you need to create a toolbox. So with maybe existing things, you need to get a community for monitoring. And that means often you need to go on site, start chatting with people, trying to create awareness, what is happening, showing them in a very simple way the impact of climate change, for example, or for example, about pollution, and that they realize, okay, this is happening. And sometimes people already know. For example, fishermen that go very often through the same area, they know perfectly what is happening. They have already seen it for decades. Their data comes to us as researchers, but often we as researchers are not that fast, but we should be very fast at least in reporting back to the citizens. So maybe not in publication, that can take a while, but at least in some simple information, newsletters, updates, because if we don't do it, the citizens will disappear quite often and quite soon. And feedback means, well, sometimes we need to look for our toolbox. Is it really good? Do we get a lot of data and good quality of data? And if not, how can we improve it? But if we do it together, if we study together the status of the wetland or actually any environment, then often it can lead, if we really have all the actors involved, to improve management and the foster of ownership. And that's only this loop will get better and better and better. But as soon as we are not acting together, then it becomes really difficult. So if there's only citizens and an NGO or in a scientific community, it becomes extremely difficult. But if we get even if it's a local municipality involved, we're getting already more effective. This kind of toolboxes are important because it improves data collection, especially in the way we try to do it with simple language on a large geographical area. It's often cost effective because environmental monitoring is expensive. If we do it as scientists, but it's way cheaper if citizens do it. They're already there. They like to do it often in their free time. It provides continuous monitoring. That's why we like to have citizens involved. And at the end, if we do it good, there's the support to the policy and management. And that's where I would like to end. Thank you very much. And then I give the floor back to our host.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these very rich and informative presentations. Fantastic work. And I just would share my key takeaways I take are the fact that the barriers really to the nature-based solutions that I heard were laws and regulations, bureaucratic burden, and political will to invest. Those are the main barriers. So that's really interesting and obviously something for us to take away and formulate how we overcome these barriers. And then also the fact that stakeholders in general are skeptical, conservative, and resistant to change. And that these citizens living the sites are not actually making use of these sites either in a kind of socio-economic benefit way. And these last messages too about citizen science and the that it's so important to have a feedback mechanism loop, that we need to give citizens information back on how they've facilitated and helped scientists gather information and what changes and positive and transformative changes are happening as well. And that citizens can continue the efforts beyond funding. So lots of really great takeaways and tools and methodologies, including the pestle. So thank you very much. We've had a plethora here of questions coming in. Thank you for already answering several of them. We have still many to answer. So I might just start off with the ones that haven't been yet answered in writing. So I'll start with Paul, who they ask, where can I find more information on the pestle methodology? Will you share the methodology and the results?
Well, pestle itself is a broadly used methodology in business practice. So if you just Google it or whatever search engine you prefer, you'll find a lot of information about it. It's generally applied internally by businesses. So you will find case studies of where they've hired a specialist to write a pestle analysis for the board, for example. In our case, we've been quite innovative and used it with stakeholders. That's not often done. So this methodology is perhaps a more innovative approach to do a regional analysis. The report that we wrote is available. Oriane, I don't know whether we can put it online somewhere. It's not confidential, so I could, it's in our group folder so it could be made available online for people to access, or I can send it to somebody if they send me emails.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Oriane, did you want to say something, contribute to that?
Oh yeah, we can discuss with Paul and find a way to put it available on our website and make an article about it. Thank you.
All right, super. Thank you. Then a question from Carlos Garcia. He says, very informative talk. So this is to Martin. The idea of solutions mean that they must solve practical problems at local level with local stakeholders. Are you planning to provide off-the-shelf tools that could be self-sustained, replicated, or scaled up beyond the duration of the Restore4Life project?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, exactly. That's the goal of the Restore4Life project as part of the EU Commission's Lighthouse mission, that we develop tools within the framework of that project that later can be upscaled not only to the rest of the Danube catchment, but also to the whole of the Europe. So it is planned that in the phase after 2025, projects will be funded by the EU Commission that will upscale those solutions to the rest of Europe. And of course, for that purpose, these tools will be made available by us for application outside of the Danube basin.
Okay, thank you. And following on for another question for you, Martin. So from Talita, she says, great presentation. How are you planning to find funds for starting new or developing existing nature-based solution businesses?
Yeah, of course, finding funding depends on the goals that can be achieved. Experience shows that often you can most easily find funding in case one of the effects of the nature-based solution is increased flood protection. So if this is the case, it's relatively easy to find funding. Another potential source is to find funding for carbon sequestration. For instance, in Germany, also in other places, many companies are seeking to sell their products under the label of being climate neutral. So they need to invest into carbon sequestration in order to show that their production is carbon neutral. And there is a demand to areas where carbon sequestration can be increased, for instance, by rewetting of wetlands. So, and of course, there are the other business models that were mentioned also by Paul, like biomass production or also tourism that can produce revenues to small businesses.
Thank you. A next question from Claudia Almeida. She asked, bringing together academia, governments, local stakeholders, as well as businesses and private investors on board is critical to achieving the global biodiversity targets. And the pestle analysis was very informative. Did you conduct baseline studies in the demonstration sites? What are your goals in terms of restoration, from reducing or mitigating human stressors to complete restoration to pristine conditions? There are several different approaches.
Oh, that's a whole book there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one.
So the pestle is the baseline study. We'll repeat it later on in the project to see if there have been any changes. There are also baseline studies in other parts of the project we haven't described. There are work packages doing the ecological baselines, socio-economic baselines, and so on, and Tim's work on citizen science. These are all baseline at the moment. It's a 4-year project, and we're still not even through the first year yet. With bringing those communities together, it's important that everybody has access to the information. That's why we wanted as much transparency as possible and get a discussion going. And it's been found quite often now that if you have a decent set of stakeholders, I mean, not in terms of the number, but actually their diversity and interest, you can come up usually with solutions between them, especially in local communities where at the end of the day, they want their community to thrive. I mean, there is self-interest, but there's also a community interest, and you have to leverage one to produce the other. I might also point out that it's been, as Mihai showed, actually, a lot of the wetland loss is from economic, seriously accelerated, ill-advised economic development, and everybody has a role to play in this. We ourselves individually have to change our own behaviours in terms of our carbon consumption, the food we eat. Far too much meat, eaten far more than you actually need for your protein requirements, which leads to a massive overuse of land for cereal production that we don't need, and so on and so on. So that everybody plays a part. But when you start doing that, markets change, and nothing changes investment behavior than a change in the market. And about the funding, that's when it starts to get interesting, because we have impact investors, we have more and more people interested in ecosystem funding. Financial institutions are now starting to pay attention. So we're on the cusp of a revolution in thinking about how we bring finance together with restoration of ecosystems.
Yeah, very good point. I'm going to jump over to you, Tim. So Zakaria asks, how can you involve earlier career scientists in your project? By which way, mainly developing countries' citizens?
That's an interesting question. It's a difficult question in a certain way. I'm as well interested to what Mihai thinks about this, because he's more project leader. In citizen science is not only about how to say this correctly. It's about including all kinds of scientists. Most of the times, actually, in projects I'm working, I see early career scientists, young scientists that do a lot with citizens, but as well professors that do a lot with it. So it's completely the full range. There are many PhDs actually working together with citizens to get enough data. So in that way, it's easy to really include them in our project. Difficult to answer for me, but maybe Mihai has an idea how to answer this. Do you have an idea, Mihai, to answer this question or not?
Yeah, well, because I was part in other, and I'm part in other projects, I can say how the others they did. I mean, the early career scientists, they gather together and they work together inside of the projects. So they, in order to have this critical mass. So we are supporting of that, and more than that, we are supporting creating links between different projects. So, for example, in Selina, which is another project dealing with the ecosystem services evaluation at European scale, they already created these early career scientist groups inside Selina. In BioAgora, which is another project they created also. But I think it's what we can do is actually to say that we are supporting this kind of teams inside of the project, and we are doing that. But let them, I mean, the early career scientists bring forward and say, yeah, we want to create such a inside project platform or teams. Yeah, and we are supporting for that. We are very supportive.
Yes,
Okay,
and on the
you.
other hand, if I quickly can answer, developing countries, many citizen science tools are freely available. So it's really easy actually to use them. You only need to create actually a kind of toolbox for your community how to use it. So even if you are somewhere in a completely different continent, there are those tools easily available for iPhones, Android, for whatever, and it's easy. But just make your own methodology around those tools. But there's no technical development or whatever, just thinking smart.
Okay, thank you. I see that Zachariah has just asked also, how can they apply? But maybe somebody can answer in the chat, or if that's okay. Because I'd like to jump to another question, because I know we still have many to get through, and I'm aware of time, so I hope we can still carry on a little bit longer. How are your decision supporting systems, or let me put it this way, how could your decision supporting systems be packaged as solutions that could then go on the Wavelengths platform, which hopefully you're all aware of, the Wavelengths platform that the Mission Ocean is funding?
I can try, but I have to ask another question because I didn't understood very well necessarily the question. But I can tell you what we have in mind when we said that we will develop a platform. So our platform is something that we want to have as a legacy of the project. So it will integrate the tools and apps that, for example, Tim talked about. And also Paul, and we want also to integrate some of the solutions that Martin presented. And we will use the satellite maps and indicators developed in other work packages. And all of that will be made available for decision support as a decision support tool. So we want, if you click a point on the map, to show you the long-term trends of the indicators for a specific place. And then we will have a list or a catalog of sites in which restoration has been done in the Danube River. and the success factors for that. And there is WWF that is working on this catalog of sites and success factors for that. So I think that is something that we will all put together. And of course, this is a hierarchy of available information and available tools. We will not design specific solutions for specific places, because this is not possible. What we want to do, I mean, this is a liberty of the sites to decide. But what we want to do is to have these tools available, and they can be used and customized for each of the sites. This is the thing that we want to do in the end with the platform. And the platform itself, it will be hosted further on what is called research infrastructures. So we have linkages with different infrastructures, like, for example, ELTR and LifeWatch. And we want to keep the platform itself working on these long-term research infrastructures opened for people around. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. And yeah, definitely, I'd love to see Restore4Life set up an entry in Wavelink's platform, because that's the main platform dashboard for all of the EU. It has over, I think now, 8,000 projects in there. So it'd be great to make sure that we that Restore4Life gets up in there and highlights those solutions and services that you've identified, and all the tools that you're being created. And also coming the apps. Yes, so just jumping over, and if somebody can answer, Zakaria, about how they can apply for the early career scientist, maybe there's some links that we could upload in there. I don't know, Oriane or Tim, if you have any links that you could share, we can make sure we also get that on the YouTube page. That would be helpful. Oriane, just there were a couple of questions oriented to you about the call that you announced. Thank you very much for sharing that. So yeah, there was some questions about eligibility. Maybe you could cover that.
Yes, sure. The question I think answer mostly already written. It was mostly on the country, right?
Yes.
So yeah, as I mentioned, again, I can show the screen again quickly. Here you can find, so I don't have all in mind the list of all the countries, but you can find here all the map of the country eligible. So they are mostly European country with a few exceptions, because we are following the European Horizon Europe framework. As I mentioned again, it's only local and regional authority that can apply. So this is an important information, and up to a consortium to 3 partners together, but they have to be from the eligible country. There is a certain percentage for subcontracting that the local and regional authority can do. But this I will ask you to please redirect your question to info@restore4life.eu to make sure you get the right answers, and also to read those frequently asked questions where you can find the answer for the eligibility information. And in the guideline for applicant that you can download, you have all the information of the language, the eligibility criteria, the type of applicant. So this is the number one read before sending any application, but you will find all information there. And if you still don't, then please send an email to info@restore4life.eu and we will answer your case.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. I'm glad we captured that again on the video. That's going to be on YouTube as well, because we have usually hundreds of people that watch these videos after the event. So they'll want that information. So thank you. So next question from Ana Enriquez. So she says, very important project. Mihai, could you elaborate on the decision support tools which will be developed by the project? For example, format, to who, applicable to all EU? If you could just give your answer verbally there on video, that would be great.
Yeah, well, like I said, Rotten, I think we are in early stages of developing the decision support system. Actually, we will have a meeting in June, and we will discuss more about how the platform will look like and the DSS will approach. But we want to do this hierarchical approach in which we are making the data available and the information available on the platform. So it will be one-stop shop for the data available. And we are also inviting others to publish their data on our website, on our platform. So the data about wetlands and about wetland restoration will be also free. And we want also to integrate the tools and different other methods into the platform, so that also the platform will be also available to different types of stakeholders from this, let's say, those who take the decision, but also those who are involved in monitoring, for example. These tools should be available for all the stages of the restoration process, from the early stages of thinking about the restoration to the implementation and to the monitoring part. So in all of the stages, we want to be able to help people do this kind of use the tools that we will have on the platform and in the DSS. So yeah, and of course the scripts will be free. I mean, most of this is not only about the scripts itself, but it's also about how you integrate the data in such a way, and what kind of indicators you use in order to do the monitoring, for example, or to do the identification of the areas prone to restoration. Because one of the biggest aspects is how to identify those areas that are good to do the restoration, available for restoration. And in many cases, this is not possible to do it from satellite. You need to involve local communities to find out what if they want to do these kind of things. That's why we stress so much on local communities, on stakeholders. If we are not able to convince the stakeholders that there is a need for wetland restoration in their area, including for businesses, and that will bring not only conservation, let's say, benefits, but also economic benefits and other social benefits, then we will lose in long term. So, like you said from Paul, there are many things that are not moving in the right direction. So we have to be able to co-create, co-develop together with the stakeholders these kind of things.
Okay, yeah. Great. Thank you very much. So I think, yeah, well, we've covered a lot the tools now. So I'm gonna thank you, Tim, for adding that comment in the chat. So early career scientists, please reach out to the Restore4Life. Go to the website, contact them through the website if you have questions about applications and getting involved. Then just jumping over to Talita had a question regarding, are these tools open source? So yeah, your answer that. Could they be applied in other geographies, namely bays, salt marshes, and estuaries? I think the answer is already clear. That's a yes. Are we? Yeah. Okay. Then I'll jump back to a question for Tim. In emerging economies, the multiplier driver is the stakeholder. The pyramid diagram should also acknowledge the I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that word is, a science or audience maybe, is not always be the driver. Sorry, the English.
Yeah,
but I think you understood, Tim. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think they mentioned science indeed. So we had this triangle with the drivers, the end users, and the citizens, the community, and indeed the driver is not always science, especially in emerging countries or even in very remote locations. We often see it's not science, but it's, for example, an NGO, or it's even community-based. But at the end, it's always there is someone that drives it. And in our case, I said scientists, but it can be whoever, it can be another stakeholder. There's always an involvement of more community members. And if there is this involvement of the end user, the policy, then citizen science becomes really effective. If not, then there's only a scientific target, for example, but not really the conservation target. So that leads the experience we have from, okay, you need to have them all involved. And who's the driver? That can indeed be a different driver. That's correct. So that's how I clarified it in the answer too.
Thank you. And are the citizens somehow compensated for their participation in the citizen science initiatives?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, because I get this from many people. From, hey, should we compensate them? Should we pay them for the time they spent? But actually, citizen science is in, I think, 99% of the cases a volunteering activity, and it's even in the graph I showed from what motivates people to do it. It's really conservation. It is having interest for the nature. It is this kind of things, and they don't want money for it. They only want to see some good implementation. They really want to see the protection in place. And that's why feedback mechanisms are very important. So if people only provide but never get things back, then they are not motivated. And that's the same what we learn when we grow up a child. There's a kind of feedback mechanism. They need to get something back. Same happens with adults that do this kind of activities. We need to give them something back. But it can be smart from, hey, we are doing at the moment this with your work, or we see this kind of very interesting findings in your work. But if they see after a few years, for example, that an area gets protected or that restoration is going in a very good direction, then they are happy. But we need to keep them up to date. And yes, in most cases it's voluntary. But in all countries, there are very good examples of voluntary citizen science activities. So it's definitely possible. There's not always a financial need to motivate people.
Okay, thank you. And seeing as we have a very diverse audience from Brazil, we have, I think I saw Mexico, Angola, the list goes on, Bulgaria. I'm curious, so if others in different countries want to set up a similar project, how would you advise them to set it up? Is it first reaching out to government authorities or to the local stakeholders, including researchers and NGOs? Could you give us kind of a little bit of a step guide?
My personal experience, but I think everyone has different experiences. We often start actually by creating a mutual interest with the local community, because if we are a small NGO and we are not effective if we don't have them involved. So we really start creating mutual interest, a good relationship together, and then slowly they start giving very interesting findings from the field. We try to back it, and at the same time, in the background, we are already chatting with the government. Hey, this and this is happening. Be aware of it. Can we start creating a nice collaboration? And then at the end, we have all the three together, and then it becomes very easy and good. But it's often not an approach from 1 year. In most cases where we apply this and where it resulted in protection, it took 3 to 5 years. So it is something from the longer term. It is not something you decide today and tomorrow you're done.
I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that or share some thoughts. No? Okay. Last question. What kind of oh, sorry, Mihai, did you want to jump in?
No. I just wanted to say that actually, what is the best way? It's how Tim described it. That you need to co-create first with the stakeholders, and then bring those thoughts back to the project design board, and work together. So it's a co-creation process. And I think that is the best way. Usually it's not like that. Usually a university or somebody is creating something, a project, and then we reach to the stakeholders, which is not necessarily the best way to move forward. The best way is to create, to have a discussion with the stakeholders, to see if it is needed, and then move forward. But usually depends on how well you are engaged with the communities and how well you are engaged also with different communities, not only with the stakeholders with the local stakeholders, but also with the academia and so on. So yeah.
And very short to add on, if already legislation exists for protection, then there is no need to start setting at the beginning with the end user, with the policy. Then you really can start directly with the community, trying to find out, is there something that's happening, bad protection, a lot of pollution, and then you can easily go to the policy and say, hey, we observe this is going wrong, but you should do something. Create a restoration activity, create a protection measure, because the law is already there. But if you need to establish law, then it's sometimes a little bit more difficult. But luckily in Europe, we have very good law in terms of that. So somehow we are lucky here.
Yeah, we do. Thank you for adding that important point. And last question then, what kind of investment is needed for running a project like this? A kind of rough ballpark figure, so these other participants have an idea what they need to ask for.
You are actually asking what is the value of the project, the total amount?
Yeah, like the funding needs, kind of what kind of funding needs did you have to pull together to put all of these test pilot areas, these sites together, and obviously outreach to all of the stakeholders and so on. Just a very rough ballpark, it's just to give people an idea around the world.
Yeah, well, this is freely available. I mean, the amount it's for this project, it's I think it's 8.5 million euros. The total amount of the financial support from the Commission. We have also 2 partners that are bringing in money, I think, which is good. But this is a rough amount of money, and please bear in mind that we are 31 partners in I don't know how many countries there are on the web. There are a lot of partners and yeah, and a lot of people involved. Yes, Oriane, you know better than me.
31 partners from 14 countries around Europe. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's big.
But
very big. Very.
If I can motivate people, it can be even with less money. Of course, we are in a really big consortium at many different locations, and that makes it expensive. But if you're alone with a small group of people, having a good citizen community involved, for example, there's often not a huge need of expensive tools. There's no need to develop many things, but at least do it. And then sometimes you can be with even less. We got huge areas protected for 10,000 euros, and now for 100,000 euros, we're trying to get around 250 square kilometers protected. So with more limited funding. So it is possible. And there are those funds for those small activities. But Horizon is indeed a little bit bigger money for larger impacts, other impacts.
I want to add to this because we are actually we are giving this cascade funding, which is 500,000 euro. So 5 projects of 100,000 euro are sent to this upscaling and demonstration process projects that are outside of the area of the project. And also we have to take into consideration the fact that this is a lighthouse project. So actually we are bringing in experiences from the Danube basin, and then we will make them available so the others can use them, the tools and the things that we are developing here. And this is the thing. So nobody should do this the second time or third time, I don't know, but they can use the tools and the things that we are developing here. So I think this is good.
Thank you. And you've taken on a major task. I mean, the Danube River is a long one. It goes through a lot of countries. So well done for taking on such a mammoth task there of the Danube, which is a beautiful river. I have seen it myself, not in all of those countries, of course, but in some of the countries. Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you, the speakers, for, again, such engaging presentations, really informative. Thank you for answering all these wonderful questions from our participants who have been really involved today. So thank you. A big shout out to all the participants. And well, we hope to have you back again after the 2 more years. I think I heard you have to do the research and develop all this. So it'd be great to hear at the end, you know, the tools and what's happened, and maybe if those barriers have shifted. Hopefully they will have by then. So yes, thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you all.